All right, team, we are back in the Fireside PM podcast, and I have Katie Durham in the show today, and we're going to talk about something that I haven't really touched on in the pod in the past, which is climate tech and investing in climate stuff. And so Katie and I intersected. We were looking at a deal together, and I thought, oh, it would be kind of fun to have you on the program and just talk about your journey, because I know a lot of PMs are, very passionate about climate and, resilience and adaptation and that kind of thing. So welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Where are you joining us from, Katie?
I'm in New York City.
Excellent. Excellent. So you're getting almost ready to finish out the day, I guess.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, tell us a little bit about yourself. I know that you didn't start out straight out of college into investing. What's the journey been like?
Yeah. So I found my passion for working on climate change very young in high school, actually. It's funny to say it, but I saw the documentary An Inconvenient Truth.
Sure.
And it really changed my whole worldview. And so starting when I was 15, I started a climate action club at my high school and got involved in community groups. And pretty much since then, all my school, years of schooling and then my entire career has been dedicated to working on climate solutions. So I started out in the nonprofit sector and interning with city governments and looking at the issue from a policy standpoint and as an activist, trying to affect political change. And then after college, I joined a startup called Mosaic as it was early days. So I was managing communications and the communications skill set is, pretty, it's transfers from activism to communications. That skill set's fairly similar. And so I spent basically the past decade plus doing marketing communications roles for climate tech startups. And then in the past year, realized that I was interested in the investing side. I think working with so many startups, both in-house and then as a consultant to many startups, I started to have a perspective on which startups I felt like had a great product market fit or, really should get more funding and just which, particular solutions I felt were ready for prime time. And just having so much knowledge from the communications and marketing side, I decided to take the jump into investing.
Yeah. What a fun journey you've been on. How has the move to investing been? How's it been so far?
It's been great. I'm early on in my investing career. So I've been working with Climate Capital for the past few months and just I'm closing my first deal. But it's funny, the first investment that I've done with them was a former client when I was working at the Antenna Group, a marketing agency. And so I had worked on the pitch deck as a consultant, and then I was sitting there getting presented the pitch deck, and the numbers have changed, the information's changed. It was 2 years ago that we worked on kind of the framework for it, but it was fun. I was like, oh, I know which slide we're on, and it's been interesting how similar it is to be thinking about the story of the company, the story of the market, the opportunity. The difference is when hired as a marketing, service provider, your mentality is let's kind of push away negative aspects or risks and minimize those. And let's just focus on the positives and focus on the opportunity. And there's still, especially with early stage VC and investing, you still want to do an element of that. Let's focus on the opportunity and let's put as much keep the momentum going as much as possible towards all the positives. But I've said no to, I've, met with startups, just said no, because I think the risks are too high for me to be comfortable with. And you don't, when you're in marketing roles, you don't get that opportunity to say, I'm not comfortable with the risks here. Like you just, you work on some things that don't end up coming to fruition, or, startups that fail. And I've worked on a fair share of startups that have not made it. And, it's frustrating because you put a lot into it, but yeah, there's a difference in, your orientation towards the information that you're getting.
What was it about this first deal that made it stand out from all the other ones you've seen that you've said no? Like, what was it about this one that you thought, brought it together?
Yeah, I mean, a big part of it is I knew the company. I knew the founder since I worked with them. And so, a big part, especially of early stage investing, is trusting the team and trusting their expertise on the issue. Like climate is such a vast topic, and there's so many technologies and industries that play a role in the solution. So this particular founder is highly knowledgeable about minerals and mining and supply chain for batteries. And so that's an area I feel like I know the right questions to ask, but trusting that the founder has deep connections and knowledge in that space was a big piece of it. I also I'm very bullish on the EV future, and to me, it's so apparent that the future of transportation will be electric. And so any solutions that make a big improvement to battery performance, to me, it's the market's there. There's no, there's some other solutions where they're highly dependent on, governments purchasing carbon credits or various things that aren't, it's a little TBD if the market is there or how strong the market is or how long term it is. But for me, anything that sells into the, EV battery space, I'm highly confident there's buyers.
Yeah. Yeah. When I was doing a little bit of research about that company, I was struck by how many different approaches to, next generation batteries there are. And a little bit like, man, I'm taking a flyer on this one. Like, I hope this one's the right one. How do you differentiate all these kind of interesting and promising approaches? Because there seems to be a lot of people going after, better battery storage and stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And that's where I feel like my communications background comes in to be so helpful, is that I look at market research. There's large groups like, all the Bloomberg folks and the, oh my gosh, I'm calling it Navigant. I was acquired. I'm sorry, I'm blinking right now.
That's fine.
But Benchmark Minerals, for this particular startup we just invested in, had done extensive market research about the solutions in the space. And, so to me, you just have to look at that data and trust the people that are doing third-party reviews of the market to understand if this is a legitimate solution and, understand the differences between the different players in the space. And that, that's something I did a lot in my marketing and communications background, was find that third-party data to validate the startup and the business model and the technology. And so that still comes into play in a great way. And then also just talking to people who know the space really well. So finding sources, people who've been in the industry, and picking their brain.
Yeah. And are we allowed to talk about this company, the name of the company, or is it still?
I guess since we haven't closed officially, I while we're live here, but maybe afterwards we can put it in the comments. I would just want to ask them, since we just jumped right into it, and I had,
Yeah, no problem. No problem. We'll have you back on after it closes, maybe to talk about, lessons learned 6 or 12 months from now or something
yeah,
like that.
that would be great. Yeah.
Yeah. Now that you've shared that you used to be in marketing and comms, I'm not surprised, because that deal memo was really thorough and
Oh,
compelling.
thank you.
And wasn't there a picture of you like in standing over a mine or something?
Yeah, yeah. I would say I used to think, just coming from like a climate activist background, like I wouldn't touch a mining company with a 10-foot pole type of thing. But I was out there when they were my client a couple years ago. And I mean, mining's just essential to the EV future, because these batteries are going to involve a lot of different minerals that you have to mine. But I mean, they operate the mine so cleanly, like it's all excavation. So I envision coal mines and people going down there with their
Mhm.
black tar on their face, and this was like, it's just excavators, like,
Mhm.
digging up on the surface level. And speaking to the people working on the site, they were like, love their jobs. They have experience doing this. They feel like they'll leave the land the same way. The prior the company bought the land from a real estate developer that was going to develop homes, and they said after they're done using this
Oh, wow.
site, they can develop real estate on it, and there'll be no difference to the quality of the land or the soil for building houses on top of. So was really, yeah, nice to be there and see it. And I think in later stage VC, you definitely go out, meet the founders more than we do in the early stage, seed stage and pre-seed stage funding I'm doing right now. But it's so great that since I had that prior experience with them, I had the opportunity to go see their site.
Yeah, I wonder, from an investor point of view, are have you set the bar like really high now? Because like you've been on the ground, you knew that company intimately. That's going to be hard to replicate for other investments where you just didn't happen to be a consultant and know the team as well. How has that been, looking at like deals like that are just cold and they come in and you have to kind of start from zero?
It's a good question. Like, how do you build trust in something?
Mm-hmm.
Um, I have to imagine that there will come a time where I meet someone cold and I just say, this sounds great. And I do enough research and have enough conversations to confirm, and without really knowing them prior, get comfortable with them in the deal. But I do think that having some network overlap with founders will be pretty important, just to really, just add that extra layer of at least someone I know knows them. Um, and it's companies, so much can go wrong. And to the topic of this conversation about also building the climate
Mm-hmm.
tech startups, I've worked at startups that have done really well. I've worked at some startups that have failed. I've worked at startups that, almost all the startups I've worked at have had to pivot and had a moment that felt kind of scary, like maybe we're going to fail. And so there's just a lot that can happen. And in early stage investing, you just have to get comfortable with the fact that there is no product market fit yet. We don't know how this is going to scale. We don't know if it's going to scale. But if the team's really solid and you really trust the people, then you can trust that they'll find solutions and keep the company going towards its mission.
Yeah, that's interesting. For early stage stuff, so much depends on the founder and the founding team. I've noticed that when you read the investment memos, of course they talk about the team, but it's like part of the overall memo, but it's not like the majority of it,
Yeah.
And I'm curious, like, that seems a little bit incongruous with what a lot of
With how much
investors say. right?
Yeah, with how much content there is about
Yeah,
the market and the product and the solution.
right.
I think with climate tech specifically, like you need to know a pretty great deal about the actual solution to make sure that it checks out, that there'll be a legitimate positive impact, that that it's based on solid research. So there's just so much information. I felt like with that memo, like I kept cutting it down, like it was twice as long, and it still was like very over
Yeah.
the recommended word count. But there's just so much information about the actual business to put in. Um, but yeah, I guess it's a combination of some hard facts and then getting comfortable with something unproven. Um, I feel like it inherently has this, emotional, social trust component to it. So, and that's hard to convey in a memo.
Totally. Yeah, I'm curious, like on the, on the other side of the table. So I'm kind of dabbling in these SPVs and taking a lot of flyers. I'm curious what it was like on your side. Like, what kinds of questions were you getting from people who were thinking of participating, and how what was that experience like?
Yeah, we got so many great questions. Some of it was asking about a little more details about the commercial traction. So
Mm-hmm.
since that was all, um, we couldn't disclose names.
Mm-hmm.
We're requesting additional details just about the stage, how much testing they were doing, where they were, and the process before signing a contract. So giving more detail there. Some people were curious to learn more about the downside protection with this because they do own a mine and they do have, other uses for
Mm-hmm.
their the reserves and minerals with if it for some reason this business model doesn't pan out, which I'm highly confident it will, but it's always good to know you have downside protection and hard assets
Mm-hmm.
in anything you invest in. And so people ask for more details about that. um, yeah, people I'm trying to think. Yeah, I would say those were the most common questions that we
Yeah.
received, were those two.
Yeah. Yeah. Makes sense. You guys are super responsive, so appreciate how
Oh,
quickly you got back. Sometimes with some SPVs, you wonder like, oh, I don't think this lead really knows much about this company.
yeah, it's an interesting,
Yeah.
SPVs are really interesting. It's like, because, yeah, you don't know. Yeah, there's all these people who are joining in together and they don't know each other and they don't
Yeah.
necessarily know the team that's doing the diligence that well. But hopefully for, you know, Climate Capital and our SPVs, there's a good deal of trust in our team since we're super active investors and yeah, the team they've do a lot of diligence on the investors that participate in leading investments on the syndicate.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, but it's interesting. It's something that never would have been possible before the technology the way we have it.
Yeah, it's incredible. I love it. Tell us a little bit about Climate Capital. Like, what's the firm all about? What do you guys, how do you, what's your strategy?
Yeah, so Capital is one of the most active investors in the climate tech space and focused on pre-seed and seed stage deals, and then will often reinvest in later rounds. But is its sweet spot and its special niche is in doing um, seed rounds. And yeah, so Sandeep Ahuja, who runs it and who founded it, he has been doing this for over a decade. He was one of the earliest investors in the first startup where I worked. And so I've known him for a long time. That was Mosaic I mentioned. He also invested through Climate Capital in Dandelion, which was another startup where I was the first employee after the co-founders, and we were a Google X spin out, and he was involved there as well. And so many of the clients I worked for, he was an early investor in. So he and I have been in the same orbits for a long time, and he is such a, I think, the work he's doing with Climate Capital, it's so essential to the industry, because a lot of people want to get in, in a later round when it's very clear the business has product market fit, that there's, the demand is proven out, and there, you just need more funding to scale up operations, or, whatever it is. Once the risks are mitigated at the later stages, it becomes competitive for VCs to get in on the hot deals. But in the early days, someone needs to take the risk, and Sandeep and Climate Capital have an amazing track record of getting in the very beginning and helping these companies. And then, Climate Capital's value prop is also just bringing a network of those later stage VCs to the table, with, once Climate Capital invests, all of a sudden now, all of the investors are resources to that startup. So helping them raise their rounds, helping them with specific strategy. For me, I want to extend my PR and marketing background to any of the startups I invest in. So, I also invested in Copper, which is a induction stove company through the syndicate. I didn't lead that one, but I invested, and was on the phone with the founder to talk through their PR strategy around a particular announcement. And that's something I'm really excited to do as an investor, is be able to leverage my background in PR and marketing to support the founders and the companies as they grow. And that's really what Climate Capital is all about, is helping these startups grow from the very early days, both through the capital investment and through our skills and network.
Love it. I was getting I was talking with someone a few days ago who was asking me for some advice on product management careers. And she was telling me, oh, I'm really passionate about health tech. And I told her, well, that's great because it's an important mission. It is very challenging versus normal software because the sales cycles take forever. You got all this regulatory stuff. The financial incentives are a little weird sometimes. You can't really iterate that fast. And I kind of feel like climate tech has some of those characteristics too.
Yeah.
I'm curious, because you won't know, the deal that we're in together, we won't know if that's going to pan out for a while.
Oh yeah.
How do you feel about going into, that environment and being able to know how well you're doing?
Yeah, sorry, is it a little loud? I can close
It's okay. Yeah, we can hear you.
New York City.
Yes.
Yeah, there's long time horizons for climate tech, very long time horizons. And there's a lot of complexity with sales cycles. There's often, I worked in the renewable energy space for a long time, and you're selling to utilities, you're selling to governments, you're selling to large real estate. These aren't quick consumer buys, for climate tech. If you're going to make an impact at scale, it's often going to be with industrial, government, utility type partners and customers. So, or, in this case, the largest automakers in the world. So similar to the health tech, issue, as you said, it's going to take a while, but the impact will be so big. And I think for people who invest in climate tech, you also need to have your heart in it and feel like, I want to be doing this work. I want to be making this impact. The only way we're going to make this impact is if we fund this stuff and we're patient as it grows and we get as much policy support as we can and all of that. So it's a huge push, and you need to have your heart in it, because if you're only financially motivated, there are a lot easier markets to be investing in. And not that they're not without their own risks and challenges, but you'll see some quicker wins if you just invest in SaaS, right? That scales so much more quickly. But with climate, this is the world, this is infrastructure. It's all hard assets. It's all real clunky stuff. It's just not there's some software solutions for climate tech, but the bulk of the high impact solutions are going to require investing in the physical world. So you have to have, for me, I feel like it's fun, it's exciting, it's what I want to be doing with my time and my energy. And And I think, yeah, you really have to have your heart to work in one of these fields.
Yeah, that's how I look at it too. Like I have investments in SaaS and marketplace companies where I'm like, I have a pretty good feeling financially has a good chance of doing well. And I kind of feel like I'm doing those partly to help me fund my bets around
Yeah,
climate, where I'm like, well, I'm trying to help the world a little bit here. Like, if I just break even, I'll be happy on the climate stuff. Hopefully, we'll do better than that,
hopefully
of
we
course.
do really well.
Yeah.
It's like, as like the mainstream world adopts the climate solutions, like cars, luxury car brands are moving towards EV solutions. That's when it starts to it stops just looking like climate tech and it just
Hmm.
looks
It's
like
just tech.
it's just tech. Yeah. So, and I also think that we have unprecedented support. We'll see how long it lasts, but there's a lot of funding from the government going into these solutions right now, and that creates some very unique advantages for private investors compared to industries that aren't going to get, government subsidies. So there's, yeah, I think the upside is huge for, especially at the start, the startup we just invested in. Again, we can probably add the name in the comments later. I just want to ask permission. It's, this could be a $200 billion market and we're just getting started. So that's a lot of SaaS companies, their market size isn't even, the potential is not even there.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I'm excited for it. Hopefully, it'll pay for like the future grandchildren's college educations down the road.
Yeah, that'd be great.
And save the planet as well.
Yeah,
So
I'm a planet.
yeah, let's talk a little, maybe just a few more questions, and then we'll wrap up. This has been super interesting, Katie. What advice do you have for people who are in traditional tech and they're thinking about pursuing a career in climate tech? You've probably worked with people who transitioned over. What are some best practices for people to think about if they want to get more involved, in an operating role in these kinds of companies?
Yeah, absolutely. So there are some accelerator programs that um, we can add to the comments later, but I can send
Hmm.
a list of resources because there's some new programs that are actually designed for people who want to pivot their career into climate tech. And so some people just take a break from their jobs or leave their
Hmm.
jobs and they'll do a program. And I've seen a lot of people successfully pivot into the industry that way. There's also just, networking. So finding people who work in the space and reaching out. Um, Also, just finding one company that needs your role. So, if you're a PM, this PM podcast, uh,
Hmm.
pretty much, all companies need PMs. So you could find a particular climate tech startup or company that is hiring for PM roles and then just join. And then from there, you're going to industry happy hours and expanding your climate
Hmm.
network and have more options. But that's always a good way to just fit right in, bring your skills that you've acquired not working in climate to climate. And, climate needs highly skilled workers that were trained in all different sectors to bring their expertise and knowledge. So that is also a great way to do it.
And for those who just made that switch over, what advice would you give them in terms of common things you've seen people either struggle with or have to navigate through? Because it does seem like a very different industry than, you know, doing weekly software deployments and things like that.
Yeah, I think, on the software side, I I think some teams probably do operate more similarly to conventional tech and,
Hmm.
sprints and deployments the same way. I think when there's a hardware component, there's slightly different processes involved. And I know there's embedded engineers, but those, there's uh, a lot of companies that have hardware that are not climate tech as well. So I think there's, people who might find that to be more like conventional tech as well. But yeah, I think that there's just an element when you think about the time horizon of the company, and the market opportunity to be thinking long term. That I think that's just inherent in working in climate tech, is that there's not so many quick wins, or I'm gonna exit this and then retire early, like maybe, but generally speaking, joining the industry is when you're thinking kind of long term about the industry's growth, being in an emerging sector, and about your own career.
Yeah, totally. I think in that case, has a lot of similarities with people doing health tech, in that you're in it for the long game, and you're getting some sort of satisfaction from just knowing that you're advancing a mission that's greater than your kind of Schwab balance. And ideally you can do both, but you really do value working on that stuff versus some ad tech thing or something like that.
Yeah.
Awesome stuff, Katie. Anything else that you want to share for folks who are interested in learning more about climate tech, or what are you excited about? Maybe we can wrap up with that. Like, what are some trends or areas that you're particularly fired up about?
Yeah, absolutely. I was just talking to a mentor this morning about carbon capture and utilization. Super interested. It feels like, especially, it's almost been 2 decades of working on climate, and there's a lot of solutions that are very uplifting, but then the world continues to emit a lot of carbon. There's a lot of really hard to decarbonize processes that exist, and so I'm at the place where I'm like, we just need to start capturing and reusing this stuff, or permanently capturing it if possible. That's great, ideal. So I invested in Loa Carbon, which was formerly Aether Diamonds. They were capturing carbon and making diamonds, which kind of gave them a big flashy name, but the amount of carbon you can sequester into a diamond is very small, because they're very small things relative to if you can make concrete or so they're now going into doing more industrial processes and focusing on that market. And my mentor, who's the founder and CEO of Ebb Carbon, they're doing ocean carbon capture, so that's really fascinating new space. A lot of R&D involved in the technologies there. But there's direct air capture, there's ocean carbon capture, and I would say right now I'm most interested in that sector and learning more there.
Love it. Yeah, super cool. I think I saw some story about people pumping carbon like deep into the ocean and stuff like that. So
there's so many solutions, and it's all pretty new technology that is finally coming to fruition and getting implemented and getting funded, and I feel like it's just so essential. So yeah,
it would be great if there were a startup that found a way to scalably capture carbon, and then some of the output of that would help other businesses make more money. Like something that is not just like, oh, we're gonna take it away, you're welcome, planet Earth, but also like, oh, and it's good for this industry that needs it in some way, or whatever.
Yeah, the utilization piece, I'm very interested in the startups that are finding a way to utilize the captured carbon in a way that just keeps our economy going and helps us not, increase the amount of carbon we're putting in the atmosphere. If we're reusing, that's great. If we can permanently embody it in a product that then makes a building, like, as I said, concrete or something like that, that's even better. But it's all good in my mind, and all essential.
Yeah, 100%. Well, excited to see what is down the road. It's going to be a long journey, but a extremely important one for the species. So glad you're doing what you're doing, Katie.
Oh, well, thank you, and thanks for having me. It's great to talk with you.
How would if people want to kind of stay on abreast of what you're working on or learn more, where should they go to kind of, connect more?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm on LinkedIn. I'll try to, update with my LinkedIn with, all the investments that
Mm-hmm.
Climate Capital is making and that I'm making. There's also the Climate Capital newsletter. So you can go to the climatecapital.co website and then subscribe there. And Sandeep puts out a newsletter with all the Climate Capital happening. So that's a really great way. And yeah, it's I would say those are probably the top two
Yeah,
ways.
follow you on LinkedIn, Katie Durham. Sounds great. I will put a link in the comments to your LinkedIn. And then if you have any of those other resources for people transitioning from tech into climate tech, I can add that too.
Yeah, perfect. I'll send that over and you can update in the comments.
Yes. All right. We're going to end the stream now. Stay on, Katie. I want to ask you one thing off the
Okay.
air, but hold on one second.